This is the beginning of time zones. First of all, is understanding what makes day and night. And as this little graphic illustrates, when you have the sun on one side, you get day. And when you have the sun on the other side of the earth, you get night because it's dark and the sun is on the other side of the earth. So to adjust for that, time zones were created. When we look at the United States, what it's going to show is that the eastern side of the country will have time first, basically, and then each hour behind, so from eastern to central to mountain to Pacific, will eventually get that same sun. So if the sun is rising, it's going to rise in the east first, and then it'll go to the central time zone, mountain time zone, and Pacific time zone. So it goes from east to west. So they get the same amount of daylight, just at different times, whereas this section of the country gets it at about the same time. So a time zone is an area that everyone has the same time. There are 24 in the world, and we have 6 in the United States. So we have the 4 in the contiguous part, and then 2 additional. So let's do these first few together, and you don't have this paper, but if we are looking, how do we figure out what time it is in other places? Again, you do not have this paper. This is just watching how I do this. So the first question says, when it's 6 o'clock in New York, what time is it in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Denver? So if it's 6 o'clock in New York, then let's put a 6 here. What time is it in Chicago, Denver, and Los Angeles? If you look here, we had 10:46, 9:46, 8:46, 7:46. So basically, as you go west, you lose an hour. So if it's 6 here, the next time zone, I've just lost 1 hour. So 6 in New York would mean 5 in Central Time Zone. And then if I continue west, I lose another hour. So if it's 6 in New York, it's 5, 4 in Mountain Time Zone. And again, when I move to the Pacific, I subtract 1 hour. So it would be 5, 4, 3 in the Pacific Time Zone. So, in looking at the sheet, oh dear. When it says Chicago, Los Angeles, and Denver, it would be 5, 4, and 3. Ooh. The time zone that we live in is Mountain. We are right here in Wyoming, so we are Mountain Time Zone. And 3 other states in our time zone. So when we look at the map, we have Montana above us, Colorado below, there's Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, part of Idaho, part of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. Those are all part of this. The next page you do have. Actually, we did have that. I copied that. In looking at this one, the example it gives, if it's 8 a.m. in Chicago, what time is it in Seattle? So if it's 8 a.m. in Chicago, which is right here, what time is it in Seattle? So if it's 8 in the green, we know that when we go west, we lose 1. So it would be 7 and then 6. This example page made a mistake because it says 8 a.m. in Chicago when it makes it 6 p.m. in Seattle. It should be 6 a.m. for the example. So let's go down a little bit and look at numbers 1 and 2. If it's 5 a.m. in Chicago, so right here, if it's 5 a.m., Chicago's green, it's Central Time. what time is it in Seattle? And we pretty much just did this just with different times. So if it's 5, we know this is an hour earlier. So 4. This is an hour earlier. So 3. So if it's 5 a.m. in Chicago, it is 3 a.m. in Seattle. Now we're going to go the other way for number 2. If it's 9:30 p.m. in San Francisco, so 9:30 p.m. means 9:30 at night, what time is it in Atlanta, which is way over here? So when we go west, we count down. When we go east, we count up because time happens first in the east. So if I have 9:30 in the blue, in Mountain Time, it's going to be 10:30. In Central Time, it's going to be 11:30. And in the purple, which is Eastern Time, it's going to be 12:30. Be careful though, because it was p.m. So by counting up to 12:30, we've crossed midnight. So now we're going to switch from p.m. to a.m. So it is 12:30 a.m. in Atlanta because it's after midnight. We're going to go to the next page. To answer the questions on this page, you are going to use the map on page 316. The map on page 316, this is page 316, so this is the map you are going to use to answer those questions. So it gives you an example first, but let's look at this. I am totally missing a worksheet. The first question, how many time zones are there in the United States? The other sheet that we read said 6. Let's look at the map just to see why. So we see 4 here. Down here, we have the purple and the orange, which actually go with these two. So Alaska is its own time zone, so that's 5 time zones. And then Hawaii time, and this is a Hawaii also. So in the United States, we have Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, Alaska, and Hawaii time. So 6 is what you would put for how many time zones are there in the United States. So let's jump down to number 4. Actually, number 4 is pretty easy. So if it's 3:30 in Wyoming, what time is it? And you will adjust. So you'll have to look at the map for Wyoming and figure out behind and forward based on that. The one that confuses people is number 5. When it says what time is it right now in those places, look at the clock right now. So on the clock, if it says it's 9:30 a.m. here, I actually want you to write it off to the side. So what time are you working on this? It's 8:30, if it's 10:30, whatever time it is, write it off to the side. So if it's 9:30 right now here, what time would it be in Miami, Florida? So when you go back to that map, if it's 9:30 in Wyoming, Miami, Florida is going to be over here. What time would it be? So it's going to go to a different time. Remember when we go east, we add. So if it's 9:30, it would be 10:30 and 11:30 Eastern time in Miami. So when you are answering these, it's going to be based on the time it is right now in Casper. And if it's AM, I need to put the AM. Ooh, crazy AM. So for all of these, they're going to be based on this time that you wrote off to the side. So make sure you write the time off to the side. The last sheet is looking at world time zones. For this, you will use the last map. You'll use this map to answer the questions. So if it's 3 a.m. in New York City, what time is it in Anchorage, Alaska? So 3 a.m. in New York, what time in Anchorage? So when you are looking at the world, and let me see if I can flip the world. So it's not upside down. 3:30 a.m. in New York, which is right here. So 3:30 a.m. What time is it in Anchorage, Alaska, which is right here? So I'm pretty much just going to look at my zones and count. So if this is 3:30, remember when I go west, I count down. So this would be 2:30, 1:30 a.m., 12:30 a.m. I'm crossing midnight, so 12:30 a.m. goes to 11:30, so now I'm at p.m. And Anchorage is in this zone. So my answer would be 11:30 p.m. because I've crossed the midnight line because I've gone backwards in time. So on the blank for that one, you would write 11:30 p.m. When you do this page, sometimes it's easier to count across the top. So if you're seeing the time zones, if you find two places, so for example, if you have Manila in one and you're looking, which time zone is it? And the lines do get a little funky. And the other one is here. What's the difference? So from 1 to 8, there's 7 hours difference. So just using these at the top might also help you to guide you to answer the questions. Let's do one more. If it's, let's see, it's 1 p.m. in Paris, France, what time is it in Chicago? So 1 p.m. in Paris, France, so we're looking at from Paris, France to Chicago. Paris, France is right here to Chicago, which is in this time zone. So if it's 1 p.m. and we're counting back, we'll have to count 1 p.m., which means like 1 in the afternoon. This time zone would be noon, 11 a.m., 10 a.m., 9 a.m., 8 a.m., 7 a.m. So, which makes sense because this one was an hour earlier. So our time should be within an hour of each other. So 7 a.m. is what you should have when you go back to that sheet. Oops. So you are going to finish this packet, and then you will do the natural resources packet.